Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and we are back with, yes, this is World of Tanks, and yes, it has been a while. Basically, I was having a bit of a peruse to see what the state of the game was like these days, I suppose. So I was having a look through some of the patch notes since I last played, so I haven't really played the game since about last July. Wasn't a specific intent of mine, it was just the way things went. And I've been vaguely aware of some of the things that happened in sort of August last year, but I haven't really kept up with the game as a whole. And I was curious what has actually changed. And here we are. Now, when I was looking through these patch notes, kind of struck me that fundamentally the game seems pretty much the same as when I left it. Now, this may not come as a surprise to a huge number of people, but I remember when there was a stage in the game when people made a lot of fuss about there constantly being new content in World of Tanks, and maybe Wargaming weren't spending enough time fixing problems or perceived problems with the game. So, having actually had a look through, I believe that the only actual new tech line introduced since I last played is the Italian tank destroyers. So what I've got for you today is a couple of games from the tier 10 Italian tank destroyer, the Minotauro, whatever. Seems to be this is a turreted TD line, and it basically looks like these guys have got pretty sweet frontal armour if you hide that lower front plate. Looks like they make rather decent hull down tanks. Also looks like they've got this sort of magazine thing going on in common with a lot of other... Oh, that was a dubious shot. In common with a lot of other Italian tanks, although as far as I can see this isn't an auto reloader, this is just a good old-fashioned auto loader, which is interesting. Anyway, I digress. My point is, I guess I wanted to pose two questions in this video, I suppose. Firstly, for those of you who've actually played this game in the last sort of 12 months or so, how are you finding it? Are you enjoying it? Has it changed a lot in the last, let's say, 12 or so months? What are your thoughts? And secondly, what do people think about kind of new content versus fixes to the game, shall we say? Do you think Wargaming are doing alright in that regard? Do you think they're leaning too heavily one way or the other? I would be curious to know. Whilst I've mentioned that this seems to be the only tech line that's been introduced, it's probably worth pointing out that this isn't the only content or the only change that's been made. So things like, for example, the wheeled vehicles that were so controversial a year or two ago, they now seem to have been limited to a maximum of one per team. The matchmaker now seems to be favouring maximum of 2 SPGs per game, things like that. And there also seem to be changes being made to some of the physics in the game. But in terms of actual new tanks, this seems to be it, except probably some premiums that I didn't really pay that much attention to. And in a way that's not surprising, because let's be honest, there are a certain subset of historical vehicles that existed. And I think at this point, we've kind of burned through all of the historical vehicles to add to the game, and we've also got quite a lot of sort of prototypes, and so we're kind of very much down to, I think this is the case anyway, pretty much down to paper tanks, i.e. ones that didn't really exist except possibly on someone's napkin somewhere, and carbon copies. I mean, let's have a look at a good chunk of the original Chinese tech tree. These were basically just Russian tanks with a different label on the front. And, I mean, there's a good reason for that, let's be honest. throughout history, well, firstly, I mean, tanks are still a relatively recent addition. Ooh, bouncing a Jagdpanther. Anyway. Tanks are still a relatively recent technology in the grand scheme of things. And there's a relatively small subset of nations that have made a disproportionate number, oh, nice kill there, a disproportionate number of the tanks that have actually been used, bought and used, globally. Countries like the United States, USSR/Russia, United Kingdom, France, Germany, those countries that are generally considered sort of big powerhouses of industry, I suppose, traditionally. And then you've got other vehicles that are sort of modifications of some of those existing tanks and so on and so forth. And whilst some other nations have built the odd tank here or there, if you're wargaming and you're looking to put tanks into sort of tech trees and whatnot, you're a little bit limited, I would imagine, in that regard. Anyway, like I say, I'd be curious to know how you think the game is at the moment with regard to, is it still fun? Are you enjoying it? Is there anything you really don't like about it? And also, ooh, he's going to be an unhappy chappy. But also, what do you think the sort of balance is like, as I say, between new content and wargaming making fixes to stuff? For what it's worth, my opinion is that people who claim that wargaming need to stop introducing new content and focus on fixing the game, I think they're missing something in that. Let's imagine wargaming went 2 years in this game without adding any new content. I would be willing to bet they would lose customers. Certainly compared to a scenario where they did add new content. I would also... Ooh, nice bounce. I would also be willing to bet that if they went completely the other way and didn't bother fixing anything, they'd also lose customers. So I think they sort of have to strike a middle ground. And broadly speaking, I think, with maybe a couple of exceptions, I think they seem to have done okay historically on the subject. Oh, looks like we're going to take a hit here. Maybe not. So they're my thoughts. I'd be curious to know yours. Anyway, the game that's actually been playing out in the background, we are watching Macbang. And, as I said, he'd been driving the Minotauro. I'm just going to call it the Minotaur because I have no interest in putting on a terrible Italian accent for anyone, really. And I apologise to any Italians out there who might already be frothing at the bit, having heard my attempt there at sort of Italian accent, maybe-ish. Anyway, he's here on steps. Oh, blind shot, blind shot, blind shot. Come on, my son, no. He's here on steps, and his team's in the driving seat, and, I mean, let's be honest, he's had a pretty good impact on this game, up to 3.6k damage that we've seen, 3,800 blocked by his armour, so this tank destroyer has some armour to work with, which is nice, although, as seems to have become perhaps a bit of a growing trend, most of that armour is on the turret and on the upper front plate. There seems to have been a lot of tanks, over time, perhaps more and more, that are hull-down monsters. I guess it's perhaps not too surprising. Take a bunch of tanks that didn't actually exist, what are you going to do with them? Anyway. Oh, that's a good point. The other thing I was going to mention, I suppose, on the subject of how do people enjoy the game at the moment, when I was looking for replays to post up, and this is nothing new that I'm going to say, but I'm going to highlight it anyway. When I was looking for replays to put up, I wanted to pick some that were recent. And so many replays are just people splurging out hundreds and thousands of credits on premium ammunition. And it actually took me, like, not hours, but it took me a few minutes to find some replays to show you that weren't people just face rolling all over the 2 key. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to take some sort of moral objection and put that here. Like, it's people's credits to do with as they see fit. But when it comes to actually posting up replays, I don't necessarily think watching people just splurging premium ammo through gun mantlets and turret fronts is the most interesting thing to watch. I would prefer to see people, you know, having a good game, basically. I don't mind using some premium ammunition here or there if it's absolutely necessary, but you're playing a tier 10 tank destroyer. Probably shouldn't be necessary all the time, although, I mean, I say that. But this tank destroyer doesn't have the highest penetration in the world, only around sort of the 270 mark. But if you're able to play that sort of close range role, then that should probably be enough. Anyway, that was our first game. Let's go and have a look at how MacBang did, and then I've got another one to show you. And I'll actually spend some time in that one talking about the game. So as we can see here, it's a pretty decent result here for MacBang. Ace Tanker, Bruiser, Duelist, Fire for Effect, Shellproof, and a Top Gun. I mean, Top Gun's always nice to get. 4,502 damage isn't honestly the highest amount of damage at tier 10, especially not for picking up an Ace Tanker with your machine. But, I mean, that damage was generally done pretty close up, as we'll see shortly. 7 kills, 1,259 base experience. Yeah, fair enough. Interestingly, second place on his team was also someone driving an Italian tank, the Progetto. So, there's that. 20 shots fired, 19 hits, 13 penetrations. It's a tier 10 tank destroyer, but for a tier 10 tank destroyer, got that relatively small gun, only around 270 or so penetration. That's sort of more medium tank, heavy tank kind of levels of penetration. Then again, the tank sort of functions like a heavy tank, so sure, fair enough. 4,502 damage done, 596 from more than 300 meters, so 4,000 of that damage was from basically pretty up close. 10 hits received, 2 penetrations, 7 non-penetrations, 4 splash damage there, well 4 hits causing splash damage, 3,840 damage blocked by their armour, 2 enemy vehicles spotted, 7 damage, 7 destroyed, 700 assistance damage, all the 7s there, must be lucky for someone, 2.91 kilometers travelled, and I mean, this is tier 10, although he only spent 33,000 credits on ammunition. This is tier 10, so with a premium account that was only just a profit, and with a standard account that would have been a loss of about 14,500 credits. So there we go, that's our first match. I've got another one to show you in just a mo. Here we go then, another game, and I don't think it's really any coincidence that here we are on a map that I can't remember the name of. What's it called? Serene Coast, that's the one. So the two maps we've had today both tend to be ones on which tanks that are strong hull down do quite well. Flip side is artillery is not your friend. So we join, oh good lord, in 3 RTI. What is that? That's not a name, that's just a collection of characters. Let's just go with in 3. Or in for short. And again, he's driving the Minotaur. And again, obviously, this is a tier 10 match. Although in this particular instance, we've got some tier 9s floating around as well. And we can see here, actually, that the Minotaur isn't the slowest machine in the world. I mean, it's not setting any speed records, don't get me wrong. But for a sort of relatively heavily armoured machine, it's chugging along at a perfectly respectable pace. So let's have a talk more about this gun. It's a 130mm gun, 530 damage, 265 penetration. It's really, if we're being honest, at tier 10 a heavy tank gun. What you're getting with this is this autoloader. Is it worth it? I don't know. I've never played this thing. I'd be curious to see the thoughts of anyone who has played it. Because it seems like the intra-clip reload on this autoloader is fairly long. It's not as if you're pumping out shells all the time, is it? But then again, you do have some armour to work with, which is nice. So maybe it doesn't have to be. Are we going to get the first shot off here? Bit of an optimistic one there at the hatch of an Object 140. And of course, there are our friendly Sky Police there to make sure that your fun is moderated. Ooh, M6. Why? I'm assuming that's the tier 9 Italian tank destroyer. Because I can't think what else it would be. Goodness knows. Unless it's, because they now do some tier 9 tanks as rewards from various sort of campaigns and missions. Unless it's something along those lines. Possible. Well, in fact, it can't be a tank destroyer because it says it's a heavy. Duh. Anyway, regardless. Finally got a little bit of damage done there. A couple of shots into these gentlemen. One shell left in the mag, and this is where you always have that choice. Do you go for the full magazine reload, as In has done here, or do you try and squeeze in that third shot? I must admit, in my experience, a lot of the time, because they know you're there at this point, in trying to squeeze in that last mag shot, there's a pretty good chance you just end up overexposing yourself, titter, and it tends to often not work out as well as one might like. So I actually quite like the reload there. He wasn't under immediate pressure, so there was some time to get the shot out. I also find it interesting here that this tank destroyer has the auto loader, but it's not an auto reloader, which has kind of been the Italians' thing. So I am interested to see that that is the case, essentially. Well, it has been their thing on the mediums and the heavies, at least. Clearly they decided to go for something slightly different for the tank destroyer. Maybe they thought with such a large caliber gun that would be pushing it a little bit, but like I said, this is really a heavy tank gun. If you compare this gun to the gun on the Tier 10 Italian heavy tank, pretty sure that thing packs about 490, 500 alpha damage, somewhere in that ballpark. This is, what, 530? So it's not exactly hitting that much harder. It does have pretty good shell velocity, though. 1303. Nice. What about the premium ammo? There we go. We go up to 330 pen. Shell velocity's still good. What are you going to do? Hello, Shah Future. How are you today? Now, this is a bit of a ballsy move here. This could go horrendously wrong, but he is gaining ground, I suppose. And there's a couple of shots bounced there from a distant progetto. 3,404 damage done so far. 1,070 blocked by In's armor, and still having the attention of those delightful artillery pieces. Then again, let's be honest, if artillery pieces aren't there to punish hull down tanks, then frankly, what are they there for? Can he get a second shot into that progetto? Yes, he can, and oh, there was a fire, but it looked like someone had a premium fire extinguisher. Fair play to them. I miss the days when you could just rebind a manual fire extinguisher to your spacebar, and with some decent reaction times, you could basically get yourself something akin to a premium fire extinguisher, but alas, those days are behind us, and whilst I do understand why, I still think it is, in its own way, just a little bit sad. Hello, Des. Who dares? You dares. And that was probably not a good idea. I'm not entirely sure why, Mr. Udes, you are endeavouring to fight this tank when it is hull down. That was a lovely shot, by the way, just to get the retrack there. And In here should be able to reload. The question is he going to be able to aim in time? And the answer is yes. Yes, he is. So that becomes kill number 4 for In here, and scorelines are 9-7, and there's plenty of hit points left on the enemy team. Nice to see the friendly team have a bit of an advantage here, but 2 tank advantage and let's call it 3,000 damage, 3,000 hit point advantage. That's nice, but it's not the sort of thing where you're going, well, this game's in the bag. I mean, no game is ever in the bag, but you know what I mean. Things can still go wrong. Nice shot there from the Gunspanzer. Ooh, haven't seen you in a while. And we shall see. Now, all of the enemy team, apart from the artillery, have been spotted. And actually, one thing I will mention, of course, is if at some point, or when at some point I do get around to playing this game, I'm probably going to have to look at crew retraining and whatnot, because these days it seems every tank commander gets Sixth Sense for free, which I do actually think is a fantastic change, because it was just such a powerful perk and you always took it. So now it's just a bit less awkward. Either Sixth Sense should have been nerfed, or they should have just made it available for everyone, and they've just made it available for everyone. So, fine. I have got no issue with that. Nice shot out there. We saw the tracer from the artillery, so he's going to be around here somewhere, and he's probably soon going to wish he wasn't. I'm kind of surprised the artillery is still here. I'm not, because the guy doesn't really have anywhere to go, in fairness to him. The Object 261 is mobile, don't get me wrong. It can definitely relocate, but relocate to where? You've got In and a 50 TP pushing down this flank. You've got an Object 430U pushing down the other flank. Like, there aren't that many places to go. Shot up the butt to pick up Hack Your Mum, love the name, and the artillery is just going to hunker down to try and see what he can do, and what he can do is die. And that is the game. There we go. Nicely done from In. Let's have a look at the post-game stats. So, there we go. Another ace tanker for In there in his Minotaur, along with Bruiser, Duelist, Fire for Effect, High Caliber, and another Top Gun. And High Caliber and Top Gun is a solid pair of awards to get. 7,035 damage done there, 6 kills or 1,467 base experience, and definitely doing a spot of heavy lifting. Interestingly, when you compare the sort of rough performance of each team, they're basically comparable. There's no obvious standouts with the exception of In here. So in this case, I think you can reasonably say his presence was something that tipped the balance in the favour of the friendly team. What is noticeable, however, when you look at the enemy team is that the top performing players on their team tend to be the tier 9s. We've got the Kunstpanzer, we've got the AMX M4 MLE, the Griller is a tier 10, the Object is a tier 10, well done to that artillery player, and then we've got an AE phase 1. So the tier 9s really were punching on the enemy team, or maybe it's that the tier 10s just kinda weren't. I don't know, Object 907 there, that only got one shot in by the look of it. Then again, T110E3 on the friendly team who did nothing. Oh, that's just disappointing. Anyway, 18 shots fired, 17 hits, 16 penetrations for that damage count. And like 6,000 of that damage was from close range. 8 hits received, 2 penned, 4 didn't. Some splash as well. 1,070 damage blocked by In's armor, 2 enemy vehicles spotted, 9 damage, 6 destroyed, 991 assistance damage, 2.19 kilometers traveled, and actually, well, a 20,000 credit profit, but you only really 7,000 if you were running a standard account, although in fairness, some of that was because In was running a premium consumable, by the look of it. 7-minute match. 1,467 base experience. Not too shabby at all. There we go. First World of Tanks video in a little while. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to give your thoughts on how the game is at the moment, I would be fascinated to hear them. But for today, at that point, I shall bid you adieu and wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.